Imagine during your next interview, you get asked this question. If I spoke with 10 random people in your life right now, how many of them would dislike you? How would you go about answering that question? In this video, I break down the 3 steps I take whenever I get interview questions I could not have possibly prepared for, and show you how to pass the round even if you give a wrong answer. Let's get started. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jeff. Come for the career tips and stay for the overcaffeinated personality. Quick disclaimer, this was a real interview question I received, and although the interviewer told me afterwards my answer was not the one she was looking for, she could see I had a very clear thought process, and so she gave me a pass. If you're just interested in knowing what the correct answer was, feel free to jump to the timestamp listed right here on screen. But the main takeaway from this video should really be the process I used to answer a question I didn't prepare for, and how that process can be replicated by anyone. Step 1, stall for time. Many people have the misconception that buying themselves some time when faced with a hard interview question makes them come off as unprepared. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Doing so actually shows the interviewer you are composed and are willing to think the question through instead of jumping to an hasty answer. Which leads me to the first tip when stalling for time. Ask clarifying questions. During my interview, when I first heard, so how many of these 10 random people would dislike you, I started to immediately ask questions like, would these people be my family, friends, or colleagues? Do we assume they all have to give an honest answer? When was the last time they interacted with me? By asking these questions, I'm buying myself time to think, and I'm showcasing problem-solving skills by conveying to the interviewer that I'm trying to gather as much relevant information as possible. The second tip to use when stalling for time. Rephrase and repeat the question back to the interviewer. After I asked 3 to 4 follow-up questions, I basically said, just to make sure I understand the question correctly, you want to know out of my entire life, if you pick 10 people random that I've interacted with, how many of them would dislike me, and we can assume they'll all be honest. Okay, at this point in time, after tip 1 and 2, I've bought myself at least 2 minutes, and my brain has spent that time trying to figure out the next logical step. The final tip to use when stalling for time. Literally ask for a minute or two to structure your thoughts on pen and paper. Unless the question is something super basic like tell me about yourself or some other really common interview question, the interviewer will always give you time to structure your answer. Again, if you think about it from their perspective, hearing an answer you took a bit of time to prepare for gives them a much more accurate sense of how you perform on a day-to-day basis versus having you say the first thing that pops into your head. Step 2. Break the question down into manageable segments. You do this by first making your own assumptions when very little information is provided. In my example, I assume out of the 10 random people, 5 of them are from my personal life, friends and family, and the other 5 are from my professional life, internal teammates and external agencies I work with. And I assume no overlap between these 2 groups. I did this mainly because number 1, I knew the math would turn out easy, 5 and 5. And number 2, using the professional and personal groupings is a mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, MECE way to break down my relationships. The MECE principle was coined by McKinsey, and although it is most often used in consulting case interviews, it definitely applies to a lot of the harder interview questions you'll receive. Now you have those high-level assumptions, you segment them into bite-sized pieces, making each part easier to tackle. Back to my example for the personal group, because I have a lot more friends than family members, out of the 5 people, 4 would represent my friends and 1 would represent my family. I use the same logic with a professional group. I probably work a bit more with internal cross-functional teams than I do with external agencies, so I allocated 3 and 2 respectively. Hopefully you can see at this point, thanks to step 1 and 2, I've taken a question that started off super vague, 10 random people in my life, and turned into something much more tangible. 1 family member, 4 friends, 3 internal teammates, and 2 external agencies. Which brings us to step 3, answering the question by addressing each segment. Starting with my family. Well, they're my family. Hopefully I can assume they all like me. So 0 out of 1 so far will say they dislike me. Moving on to the 4 friends. Taking my Instagram and WeChat friends as a benchmark, I'd say I catch up with around 25% of them on a regular basis, and we get along pretty well. 50% probably feel neutral towards me. They don't love me, they don't hate me, they don't really care about me. And the remaining 25% I've probably frustrated or annoyed at some point in the past due to my high maintenance yet perfect personality. So all in all, 1 out of the 4 friends would say they dislike me. Moving on to internal teams I work with. I'm very blunt and direct at work, so I'm certain at least a third of my teammates find me slightly / very difficult to work with. So 1 out of 3 would say they dislike me here. And finally, for external agencies, how they view me will usually be based on the project we're working on at the time. Half the projects go very well, half of them need a bit more work, so they might not like me 50% of the time, meaning 1 out of 2 here. If I add all this up, 3 out of 10 people in my life would say they dislike me. Couple things I want to point out before moving on to what happened next. First, while the reasons I gave for the like to dislike ratio isn't scientific and wouldn't hold up in court, my rationale and logic were hopefully clear and easy to follow. Second, the way I went about the question was a way to go about it. You could have easily segmented the 10 people chronologically, from your childhood friends to your current acquaintances. Finally, as I was making those assumptions and segmenting the groups, I was articulating all of that out loud, so the interviewer could easily follow my train of thought. So what happened next? Well, after I gave my answer, the interviewer didn't challenge me or anything and just moved on to the next question. It wasn't until a week or so after I had already passed the round that the interviewer told me, although she liked my approach, it wasn't exactly what she was looking for. And so she mentioned that because the role required working with a variety of different teams, I should have, number 1, only segmented the 10 random people by the teams I would have worked with. Sales, marketing, and engineering teams, for example. And number 2, I should have broken down those teams by their objectives. And number 3, mention how sometimes the decisions I make might not be fully aligned with their goals, aka they might dislike me, but that's something I should be okay with as long as I'm doing what's right for the business. After hearing her thought process, I do agree her answer makes a lot more sense than mine. But again, the main point here is that she didn't give me a number out of 10 as a correct answer, right? It was more about the logic I used to arrive at my answer that ultimately helped me pass that round. If you found this anecdote helpful, you might want to check out my data-driven video on how to write an outstanding resume, or my playlist on all the common interview questions and answers. See you on the next video, and in the meantime, have a great one.